She stammered, her tiny voice unsure, but before she could get the words out, Leonard appeared. His hand gripped her wrist so tightly it hurt. Later that night, he leaned down to whisper in her ear, his voice low and chilling. "If you tell anyone," he murmured, "your father will send you away. You'll have nowhere to go, and no one will believe you." She wanted to believe that he was wrong, that if she ran to her father, he would scoop her into his arms and protect her. But her father had barely spoken to her since her mother died. He was always too busy, too preoccupied, and deep down, Stacy was afraid he would look at her with disappointment instead of love. But still, Stacy wanted to tell her father, no matter what. There were so many times when the words sat at the tip of her tongue, waiting to spill out. She would stand in the doorway of his study, hands clasped tightly in front of her, heart pounding in her chest. Her father, Pastor Michael, would be seated at his desk, flipping through his Bible or preparing his sermon notes. He always looked busy, too busy. "Papa?" she would start, her voice small, uncertain. "Yes, my dear?" He wouldn't look up right away, his eyes still focused on his work. She hesitated, her fingers curling into the hem of her dress. This was her chance. If she could just say it, if she could just tell him what Uncle Leonard was doing, maybe everything would change. Maybe she could finally be safe. But before she could find the courage, he would sigh, close his book, and glance at his watch. "We will talk later, Stacy," he would say, standing up and grabbing his coat. "I'm late for service." And just like that, the moment would pass. Sometimes she would follow him down the hall, desperate to hold on to the conversation before it slipped away. "Papa, it's really important. We will talk later, my dear. I promise," he would say, patting her head absent-mindedly before stepping out the door. Later never came. At dinner, he would ask if she had eaten, remind her to pray before bed, and tell her how proud he was of her. But he never noticed how her smile never reached her eyes. He never saw how she flinched when Uncle Leonard walked into the room. And Stacy began to wonder if maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he knew something was wrong. Maybe deep down he sensed that his daughter was breaking, that something terrible was happening right under his nose. But facing the truth would mean admitting that he had failed to protect her. And Pastor Michael was a man of faith, a man who was supposed to guide others. How could he not have noticed his own child suffering? So he drowned himself in his duties, convinced himself that his daughter was simply grieving, that her quietness was just the weight of losing her mother. He never stopped to ask if there